Oh, the quick fix. My comment section would have you believe that this is the pub medic's dream. In fact, it's a sentiment I see pretty often throughout the entire TF2 community. It all seems to boil down to something along the lines of, the quick fix is great when my team is bad because it lets me keep them healthier and get Uber faster when they can't protect me properly. And of course, looking at the weapon stats, the main positive of the quick fix is that 40% increased heal rate, allowing you to top off allies faster than any other metagun. Your base healing rate is 34 health per second rather than the standard 24, with crit heals scaling all the way up to about 100 health per second instead of 72. And this does make a noticeable difference in the amount of time required to beam someone up. That faster healing can let you heal up low health players anywhere from 1.5 to 3.5 seconds faster, depending on the class. And since Medic is typically limited to only healing a single player at a time, the quick fix allows you to move on to another teammate and beam them up quicker as well, creating a compound effect of getting your players back in the fight, hence the name Quick Fix. Other than that, the Quick Fix differs from stock by building a little bit faster, half as much overheal, the unique ability to mirror blast jumps from beam targets, and a different Ubercharge in the form of Megaheal. Let's start diving into these stats, because while that 10% boost to the Ubercharge rate is nice, it's actually the lower Max Overheal that makes the Quick Fix seem to build so much faster than stock. Medic has a hidden passive that cuts his build rate in half whenever he is beaming a teammate above 142.5% health, among other conditions. However, because of that 50% Max Overheal negative, you can only ever get a teammate to 125% maximum health, which is not enough to reduce your building rate. This is why even though Quick Fix only builds up to 3 seconds faster than stock on paper, in practice, it will almost always build around 10 seconds faster, as it forces you to build more optimally than the other metiguns. Valve has said in previous patch notes that they fixed this interaction, but it must have broken again along the way, because currently, and for the last few years at least, the Quick Fix continues to build at the maximum rate when a teammate is fully buffed from its beam. Once you get to that juicy 100% charge, the Quick Fix's Uber provides you and your patient with a mega heal in place of stock's invulnerability. Your base healing rate triples to around 100 health per second, and you both receive complete immunity to movement impairing effects. I'm talking rockets, air blasts, even the Natasha does nothing to stop you. On paper, the Quick Fix seems very promising. It heals faster and builds faster than stock, gives you increased mobility, and even though the Uber is weaker in most scenarios, it builds faster and has those unique benefits that can sometimes shine. So then why has it always just felt so weak to me? With all my extensive experience on Medic, the Quick Fix remains as the metagun that just seems to be at least a tier below the rest in overall power level. Of course, stock is king. Its Ubercharge is just too versatile and robust for it not to be. But both the Kritzkrieg and Vaccinator have plenty of games and moments where they can situationally overthrow stock and become monsters in their own right. However, as much as I've used the Quick Fix, I rarely, if ever, get that same feeling. It's difficult for me to think of a single game where I felt the Quick Fix had a substantially greater impact on the outcome than stock could have. I've had good games for sure, great games even, but never really one where I thought to myself, this was a complete Quick Fix angle. If I was on any other metagun, we would have lost. But the reverse is very often true, especially as I was using the weapon a bit more to gather these clips for the video. I found myself thinking that I possibly could have closed out a round with a stock Uber, or maybe actually held that point by critzing my demo over and over again. If only I weren't using Quick Fix.
Anyone have criticals? Critical. Your Quick Fix, wow.
That's the perfect reaction. It bothered me so much that I thought about the overall role Medic plays for his team and how Quick Fix slots into that paradigm. And I've come to the conclusion that while Medic is the quintessential healer class of TF2, healing is only the third most impactful benefit he provides his team with. Ubercharge is the most important and game-changing mechanic Medic has in his arsenal. In fact, Uber is probably just the strongest single mechanic in the entire game, period. Uber pops win games. Simple as that. You need to look no further than competitive sixes to understand the function Ubercharge plays. In a coordinated environment at the highest level of competition, the whole team's game plan and strategies often revolve entirely around what your medic's Uber percentage is compared to the other team's medic, which again is why surviving is of the utmost importance on Medic. Fewer deaths equals more Ubers, substantially increasing your odds of winning. But after Ubercharge, the second most influential benefit a Medic provides for his team is that Overheal. I genuinely believe that Overheal isn't talked about enough when it comes to casual Medic guides and is too often undersold. Buffs are ridiculously busted and don't get the recognition they deserve. A 300 health soldier is absolute hell to fight unless you are also buffed. And don't even get me started on how strong Scout is when he no longer has to fear death after taking one solid hit. But with the quick fix, your overhealing capabilities are cut in half. You can maintain a larger buff given to a player by another medic, but their health will just remain the same unless they are below 125%. At least 50% max overheal is what's stated on the weapon stats. In reality, it's actually worse, because while you are limited to 125% overheals, that smaller buff decays at the same linear rate as any buff from a medic does. A full buff on any class takes 15 seconds to decay from 150% health back down to 100% if they don't take any external damage, a rate of 3.33% max health per second. That decay rate remains the same on the quick fix, meaning a quote-unquote full buff from the quick fix will only last 7.5 seconds before the patient returns to 100% health. Simply put, your buffs are not only half as strong, they also last half as long. These worse buffs have a knock-on effect for your team throughout the game that is hard to quantify, but it certainly has some notable impact on your player's general health status as they take fights. Any medic in a game of TF2 has a sort of sphere of influence around him because of his healing and overheal capabilities. Players nearer to the medic will generally be buffed or at least healthier to some degree, allowing them to take more favorable fights and in turn keep the medic alive by providing a buffer between him and the enemy players. That's of course a very simplified view of the game, but it generally holds true. When running the quick fix, those weaker buffs limit your sphere of influence, tightening it up just a little bit. Players just can't extend as far away from you to take a fight while remaining as overhealed as they could have with a 150% buff. This means that the shield of healthy players in front of you that medic relies on to keep him alive during a fight is smaller or weaker, or smaller and weaker than it would be if that medic was running stock. On stock, it's not uncommon to just sit in the back, leisurely crit healing your players up as they pass you by to a full 150 in complete safety as you build your Uber. You don't need to be directly on the front line healing, risking sightlines and spam if your players already have the advantage of more health than the enemies in the form of a larger overheal. That is not a playstyle that works on the quick fix. It forces you to be more involved in the action, using that 40% extra heal rate to give your front line the edge as they're fighting, which is pretty damn fun, don't get me wrong. I love me some intense frontline healing on medic, but it's also riskier, and most of playing medic well is about positioning and mitigating as much risk as possible while still providing your team the largest advantage you can. That was a very long-winded way of explaining why the lower overheal on the quick fix is actually a worse negative than it seems on paper. And after all that, I know people are already typing in the comments about the 40% extra healing. I can see it now. But theory, surely the extra 40% healing on quick fix makes up for the lack of overheal when it comes to keeping your team more healthy overall. But in my experience, by using the crossbow on very low health teammates and abusing crit heals as much as I possibly can, it never really felt like my team was meaningfully healthier while using the quick fix than on stock, except for those times I pop Megaheal and heal several guys up exceptionally fast. Of course, a claim such as that would be challenging to quantify, and I guess you would never really know, except I do. Do you think I'm going to claim that the quick fix is worse than the other metiguns without some hard data backing it up? That's not how we do things here. I have been painstakingly collecting all of my overall stats from basically every single casual 12v12 round I have played for over half a year. Combine that with the duration of each game and some simple math, and we have a ton of averages to look at based on which metagun I was using. But before we get to all that, allow me to explain the methodology behind this data collection. The entire dataset consists of 517 individual rounds of TF2, totaling 117.6 hours of gameplay, 248 rounds and 54 hours for stock, 85 rounds and 18.7 hours on the vaccinator, 133 rounds and 32.7 hours for the quick fix, and 51 rounds and 12.2 hours on the crit streak. Even with a meager 51 rounds on crits, this is more than enough data for a representative sample size when looking at averages per minute. I crunched a couple of standard deviations and confidence intervals to be sure, and they were very tight. To ensure the data was as consistent as possible and control for the variables I actually could, I only recorded games where I was actively trying to win. Any game where I decided not to take it seriously is obviously not included in the data. I usually played medic for the entire round, start to finish, for the data to count. If I ever switched metiguns during the round, for example, example, if I was running Kritzkrieg and then switched to Vaccinator on Barn Blitz last, the spreadsheet does properly reflect that. I carefully tracked my exact time on each metagun down to the second and subtracted any deaths, healing, assists, or other stats I got on another one in the same round. If we won the round, I would count that as a win for both metiguns and vice versa. Going back through stream VODs allowed me to quickly verify that this data was correct. I always used what I consider to be the most viable loadout on every metagun. This basically just means I used the crossbow as my primary and used either the Solemn Vow or Ubercharge in my melee slot. I wouldn't want the Kritzkrieg to look worse on paper because I was equipping the syringe gun only with that metagun. Severe and obvious outliers were thrown out. Games where we had 4 more players than the enemy team and crushed them in a couple of minutes, I felt would not give any useful data on the viability of a metagun, as I could have been playing battle medic and still won. The reverse is also true. If we lost almost immediately due to a large player advantage on the enemy team, I don't think that is the metagun's fault. Thus, I removed such games from the spreadsheet as they would only skew death and win rate averages. The one bias I couldn't fully account for entirely, but did try at least a little bit, was generality. It's no secret that if I picked a metagun at random, using each for about 25% of the total playtime, the data would skew heavily in favor of stock. Due to the insane power of invulnerability combined with no healing related downsides, it's just the most versatile metagun that will perform the best across a large sample of games. As such, I tried to only equip a metagun when I felt like it was a reasonable situation to be using it in. That is why about 50% of the total rounds are on stock. If we were on offense against sentries, I'm using stock because, well, it's just the best. As a result, Vaccinator got most of its playtime on defense. Quick Fix also got a lot more playtime on defense when I wasn't the only medic or there weren't sentry nests that needed destroying. And Kritzkrieg got playtime when I had another teammate that I felt could actually make it fat. Of course, I'm not perfect in my game-to-game assessment, so non-stock metiguns may have slightly deflated stats. But at the same time, this makes the data more realistic if you were to run one of the aforementioned metiguns full-time instead of switching based on the game state. If you only use the quick fix, you're going to run into situations where you need to push a sentry nest with it and it may fail completely. Alright, so what did I discover? Well, some of my assumptions were more or less confirmed and others were definitely not. That's the great thing about looking at data like this. It gives you a new outlook on how these metiguns interact and affect the rest of the game overall. It lets us speculate on why the end results are so different. Finally, please note that this data holds true for me only. I have my own playstyle, and other players that play medic differently could get vastly different results, even by collecting data in the exact same manner. That being said, the win rates don't lie, so I must be doing something right. Overall, I had a 76.7 round win rate across all metiguns. Not too shabby. I bring this up not to claim I'm God's given medic or anything, but to say that I don't think a reasonable explanation for the relatively low win rate with quick fix we'll see in a second is that I don't know how to use it or play medic well in pubs. I can obviously do very well as medic in pubs. Stock had the highest with an absolutely staggering almost 87% round win rate across all those 248 rounds. I can only explain this by the fact that I almost exclusively ran stock when the map was offense payload or attack defense, and on most of those maps, the offense team is favored heavily to win because it only takes a few solid team pushes, while the defense has to hold on for upwards of 10 minutes at times. And lo and behold, solid team pushes are precisely what a stock medic provides his team, given he can stay alive reasonably well and pop a lot of Ubers. Those Ubers give the offensive team repeated chances to cap points and push forward, often leading to a W. Quick Fix, on the other hand, had the lowest overall win rate at about 64%. This was actually surprising to me, as I expected Kritzkrieg to be at the bottom of the win rate list due to its high risk to reward playstyle. But I suppose the fact that I only used crits when I actually had at least one other decent player on my team helped out quite a bit. And the rest of the data does help lend some credence to that lower quick fix win rate. Average life duration falls in line with exactly what you'd expect. I had the shortest average lifespan running crits, with quick fix only slightly behind. This makes perfect sense to me, as they offer the lowest defensive capabilities while simultaneously encouraging a more active playstyle than stock. Vaccinator had the longest average life by far at almost 5 minutes because, well, besides spies or unseen snipers, what's gonna kill you if you're paying attention? And all of the other data pretty much falls in line with what you'd expect from each metagun in terms of assists and Ubers per minute. The biggest surprise to me was the average healing per minute. The overheal penalty on the Vaccinator really rears its head here as the one big downside of that metagun, only getting about 75% of the total healing per minute of the other 3 weapons. That lack of health definitely adds up throughout the game. Crits also healed about 8% less on average than stock in the quick fix, which I can chalk up to more deaths on average and my general general proclivity on crits to pocket one or two better players on the team rather than spread heals as effectively as possible like I would with stock and quick. But then we look at the healing differences between stock and the quick fix, or lack thereof. Across all these games, on average when running the quick fix, I only healed about 2% more per minute than stock. In other words, the seemingly largest positive of the quick fix, the 40% increased beam healing you're trading away a stronger Uber and buffs for, is virtually non-existent. And keep in mind, this includes the healing I get from popping Megaheal. Quick fix undoubtedly heals more than stock by a bit when you're alive, but those extra deaths are dampening the stats in a big way. Now, if you aren't crossbowing nonstop and abusing crit heals as much as I do, this gap likely widens quite a bit. But it goes to show that for more experienced medic players, there is not a single compelling reason to use the quick fix over stock in 12v12 besides the change of pace it offers. And that's where I'm personally at with the quick fix. I like using it, but if I'm being honest, there's little reason to use it other than the fun factor. So hopefully this data puts to rest the casual quick fix versus stock debate. The unfortunate truth of it is, simply spreading heals alone just isn't the way to play medic and win in casual. The quick fix lacks the pocket potential of crits or vaccinator and the massive push potential of stock in favor of that healing prowess. And at the end of the day, it's pocketing your best players or those big pushes that get you the W. The war of attrition just doesn't work most of the time in TF2. And please don't go to the comments and use the fact that the quick fix is banned in competitive sixes as a reason for it being strong. As someone who's actually played a decent amount of sixes, an ungodly amount of pubs, and some Highlander myself, sixes is in no way comparable to pubs. It's banned because it encourages a very toxic and stalemate prone playstyle that no player wants to deal with. A quick fix medic is able to roll out faster with his soldiers, and the increased heal rate and build rate give his team a massive advantage in mid fights. This means if one medic goes quick fix, the other is forced to respond in kind, not to put their team at a disadvantage immediately. Stalemates also become harder to break because of how slippery a quick fix medic is by coordinating jumps with his soldiers or demo. Sacks to drop or force the enemy become much more challenging to pull off. The quick fix by design is destructive to the particular flow of the game sixes aims to promote, while also taking less skill from the medic player to utilize correctly. Thus, the ban is justified. Highlander is much closer to pubs than sixes, and unsurprisingly, the quick fix is neither banned nor considered even remotely good in that format. But this video isn't just supposed to be about me explaining why you shouldn't use the quick fix. I just had to spread the truth after so many years of hearing repeatedly how great, how busted, how OP it is in pubs, while all my personal experience points to the opposite. If you like using it, by all means, don't allow me to ruin your fun. Ultimately, the quick fix is still a metagun, making it extremely strong in the overall scheme of the game. So, what are some strategies and playstyle changes you can make to increase your effectiveness with this healing machine? When utilizing the quick fix, rather than playing to the weapon's advantages like I do with the other three metagons, I often find myself needing to play around the quick fix's weaknesses instead. Your Uber, more often than not, loses head-to-head confrontations with stock and the vaccinator. It can help mitigate their effectiveness, but an invincible player versus a player that can actually take damage is a fight that can only go one way. So while it is still a good idea to exchange Ubers with enemy pops, you are often doing so to partially negate their pop and make it out alive, not necessarily maintain or even advance your position like you would with a stock Uber exchange. When the exchange is over, you can build your Megaheal again faster than they can build that stock Uber, potentially letting you pop in offensively while they still have no charge ready if the situation calls for it. Oh, and don't even try to quick fix into a crit streak. You will die. So rather than being as proactive as I am when playing with the other metagons, I play more as a form of damage control, reacting to what the other team does and trying to neutralize their pushes by keeping my team as healthy as possible. Let's dive a little deeper into that Megaheal Ubercharge while we're here. Fundamentally, a few issues arise when trying to use the quick fix's charge optimally. Since it doesn't prevent any upfront damage like stock or the vaccinator do, you ideally want to use the charge on a teammate who has already taken some damage. But if they are too low and still under fire, you run the risk of them dying right after you pop before they heal up at all. Additionally, Megaheal's weakness to focus fire simply isn't going to allow you to pop on a demo and muscle your way through a heavily defended choke point like stock will. When using the quick fix, you learn very quickly that you just can't treat its Uber like it's stock. Unfortunately, sometimes your teammates just don't get the memo. This is one of the more considerable downsides to Megaheal that is outside your control as the medic player. You will pop on a teammate, hoping to simply heal them up while they're not under too much fire and get them back in the fight. But they see that they just got Ubered and immediately throw themselves with abandon at the enemy team, believing they're invincible, only to die to focus fire 2 seconds later. We've all been there when using this metagun. Well, they're getting through. It's almost like that Uber's way better than mine. So I personally find the best times to use the quick fix's charge is when you need to heal up a player, or better yet, several players that are in at most a light skirmish. Getting players back in the fight is the strength of this Uber, not starting fights like stock or crit screen. Using your Uber this way also helps prevent those situations where your teammates waste your mega heal by thinking they can't die, then die instantly. Another difference in playstyle is how much more important flashing is on the quick fix than any other metagun. Learning to move your beam to a more deserving teammate during your pop is extremely important. On quick fix, once your current patient is max overheal, your Uber isn't really doing much for them anymore. So switching beam to a different player can allow you to heal much more overall health throughout the duration of your charge if multiple teammates were low to begin with. Unfortunately, the quick fix does still penalize your total Uber duration for flashing a new teammate, even though your old patient does not receive any residual effects of the Uber. They instantly lose the healing. Quick fix is identical to the Kritzkrieg in this regard. Still, most of the time, it is best practice to flash as many low health teammates as possible to maximize your mega heal's impact. I also find it best to be less discretional with quick fix Ubers than with stock or crits. Since you have a weaker Uber, your only advantage with regard to using comes from that build rate and being able to pop more Ubers overall. Quantity over quality is the name of the game when it comes to this metagun. I'm not saying just pop instantly when you get to 100%. That will waste a fair number of your Ubers. Just lower your standards for situations you use in by about 20%. So while popping, which classes should you prioritize mega heal on and in what situations? Unlike stock, which has a massive amount of versatility when it comes to its Ubercharge, on quick fix, I only think about my Ubers in terms of general offense or defense. In offensive Ubers, where your goal is to kill enemy team members, gain a positional advantage, or destroy some buildings, I prioritize my demos, soldiers, scouts, and sometimes pyros. Demos and soldiers can jump in and out of danger during the Uber, traversing the map without losing any health at all because you can just jump with them. Combined with the demo's ability to nuke and lock down areas of the map, you can still have a reasonably destructive Uber. Just don't expect to round a corner into a sentry nest and brute force your way through like you can with stock. If your goal is to kill a few buildings, then scout isn't your guy. But if you're just trying to secure some frags on the enemies, scout can be one of the best quick fix patients in the server. Scout is already slippery enough that with a mega heal, he's near impossible for less than 2 or 3 players to focus down and kill. Additionally, his move speed will make you slightly harder to take down as well. Pyros can just WM1 without any inhibition due to the knockback immunity. And quick fix flog, while not as powerful as stock flog or vaccinator flog, is still a borderline war crime. Any other class is pretty severely lacking when trying to use a mega heal offensively, so I would generally avoid them. Quick side note, in these offensive scenarios, sometimes piggybacking a quick fix Uber onto another medic's stock charge can be helpful for the knockback resistance alone. Letting a demo just walk through anything while invincible can be devastating to an enemy sentry nest. The only real counter to stock Ubercharge is pushing him away, and quick fix can remove that as an option. For defensive Ubers, which I find are the vast majority of pops with this metagun, a pyro with mega heal can fairly reliably stuff an enemy push or Uber through a choke, peeking in and out, air blasting enemies back while unable to be moved themselves. Keeping your explosives as healthy as possible is extremely important on defense as well. They are often the ones holding down doors and making sure enemies can't just walk through. Otherwise, if there is fighting going on, I will just pop Uber whenever I have 2 to 3 critically low health players to get them healthy and back in the fight in a hurry. If I think there is sufficient downtime to arrow them up instead, I'll save my Uber. But as soon as things get messy, I'm popping. Heavy can be a solid choice for just locking an area down, but keep in mind that a heavy unable to be knocked around is a fairly large target that isn't moving. It's actually pretty easy for a few classes to kill a heavy even through a mega heal when he just eats every bit of damage thrown at him. And let me tell you, that knockback immunity is such a double-edged sword. Sometimes it's great, entirely denying a pyro from stuffing your Uber, or heaven forbid, air blasting you off a cliff. But knockback immunity means you also aren't surfing those rockets or being pushed back away from the heavy by his bullets. You become much easier to focus fire because you just aren't being bullied around by damage like players typically are. So here's a small tip. If your pocket dies and you need to escape, a well-timed weapon switch can allow you to still surf damage before switching back to your quick fix and healing up. When you switch weapons during an Uber, you lose all of its positive effects, including that knockback immunity when it comes to the quick fix. And just in general, you need to be more on your toes during Megaheal than stock Uber. You aren't invincible and can still be headshot, backstabbed, or just killed by spam. At the same time, your awareness for potential teammates that want to flash needs to be high as well. But even a single close range pyro can completely negate the healing from Megaheal, leaving you vulnerable to any extra damage heading your way. To somewhat mitigate this, quick fix pairs very nicely with any form of damage reduction. The extra healing combined with some form of resistance significantly increases the effective health per second of your beam. Basically, it's just excellent when used in conjunction with a battalion's backup soldier, removing the fear of crits and headshots while making you even tankier. Additionally, quick fix is the only charge in the game that can neither cap nor block points during the Ubercharge. I have lost games because I forgot about this interaction before popping in an attempt to save the game, so it's something to be mindful of. The stock Medigun, with its invulnerability, essentially cleanses the medic and patient of any debuffs such as bleed, afterburn, or Jarate when popped. While the quick fix does not share such a trait, beam from all Mediguns in general can significantly lower the duration of these debuffs on teammates. It seems that popping Megaheal is coded in a way that you are basically giving yourself beam during your Uber, so these debuffs are removed much quicker from you, the medic, than they usually would be. This attribute is not insignificant in the case of Jarate and afterburn from flamethrowers. Taking mini crits puts you at a much more considerable risk of dying even during a Megaheal, and afterburn from flamethrowers specifically lowers the healing of your Uber down to 72 health per second. Removing these negatives faster can sometimes make the difference between life and death, so much so that I have learned to panic pop with the quick fix if I get splashed with Jarate during a fight where I'm going to be taking some damage. Oh, there is a bug with quick fix Uber that seems to be triggered sometimes by popping on a teammate that currently has healing from another source. The Uber will start healing at crit heal rates regardless of when your teammate last took damage. This means that sometimes your pocket will randomly receive 300-ish health per second instead of the usual 100 for Megaheal. I don't know how to reproduce this exactly, but it always has something to do with other sources of healing on the team, be it another medic or the payload card. Aside from that knockback immunity, the quick fix's other unique perk is the mirrored blast jumping. This lets you fly in deep with the same momentum as your rocket and sticky jumpers, but it also mirrors your friendly pyro's debt jumps or thermal thrusters and your demo night charges. If you don't want to die horribly, then you need to be aware of what these classes may be doing, when they may jump or charge, and please learn to air strafe. I cannot stress this enough. Play some Jump Academy. It will help fantastically with things like damage surfing and just general movement on medic. Sometimes unfortunate things will happen. Bro, you stuck me there!
What was that spot? I just stuck in it.
Quick fix detected. So watch your soldiers. You can time your jumps even with randoms if you're paying close enough attention. And this form of jumping doesn't count the medic as having blast jump themselves. So you won't be mini crit by weapons such as the direct hit or reserve shooter when flying across the map. And this is the part where people tell me in the comments about how overpowered this jumping is when used in combination with a soldier duo. I get it. You've done it before and gotten a 25 kill streak on Badwater. But I retort with this. If you're duoing with such a good player, I cannot guarantee that the crit streak would be a more effective, if more basic way of farming the enemy. So after all that, when should you be running quick fix instead of another Medigun? Well, if you can't tell by now, there aren't many times where I would seriously pick it up if your only goal is winning. But overall, the quick fix is better in defensive situations, as the negative of not having invulnerability doesn't matter as much. You are holding the chokes, not pushing through them. The quick fix is also just chill. To me, it seems much easier to use without thinking much compared to the other Mediguns. It's legitimately the best option if you just want to vibe while helping your team out. I really like running the quick fix with a syringe gun too. You feel the lack of crossbow less because of that boosted heal rate. And while I would never recommend using it as a solo medic, seriously, I think it's pretty garbage if you're the only medic on the team, especially on offense. Your players won't be buffed as well, and you have a weaker Uber. Just run stock if you're solo healing and want to carry the game. But when you have multiple medics on the same team, their build rates always end up slightly worse due to the medics competing against each other for healing. It might not be much, around 5 seconds per Uber or so, but it does happen because when two medics are healing the same target, or you're healing someone above 142.5% health, your Uber build rate is cut in half. Those situations are bound to happen more and more often the more medics on a team. However, quick fix is hardly affected by multiple medics because of that overheal stat. As long as you aren't healing a player player that your other medic already buffed up, you will still get a mega heal every 40 seconds or so. I'm not going to tell you running quick fix as a secondary medic is better than just going stock and having 2 stock Ubers, or having a stock Uber and a Kritzkrieg, because I don't think it is. I'm just saying this is an option, and it's less bad than running quick fix solo because you still have a strong pushing presence in the form of your other medic. Meanwhile, you are providing that extra support with your quick fix. My actual endorsement of the quick fix comes in the form of newer players. That increased build rate, lower reliance on popping Ubers at an ideal time, and faster healing make it a much more forgiving metagun for people who are still learning the ins and outs of the class. That extra healing also places less emphasis on hitting as many crossbow shots to keep your numbers high. The lack of invincibility also teaches young medics not to overextend nearly as much during the pop, since they can still die. It's a great intro metagun you can use before graduating onto the other options. Finally, low player team comps are ideal for the quick fix. I fully believe the stats look so dire because they are all from usually full 12v12 servers. If you are ever on a half full server, the quick fix may actually become a rival to stock in those situations. The extra healing from beam becomes more valuable the less damage the enemy team can output, as fights will be more drawn out. Mega heal inches closer to invulnerability as well, with less players to focus you down. At the same time, unless they actively use Basher or something else to supplement building, you will be getting to 100% much faster than any other medic in the server. Even jumping around and flanking with a soldier becomes more viable, as you can more confidently fight stragglers without running into a large group of enemies. Well, that's how I personally play with this metagun and where I found the most success. Quick fix purists, I dare you to still defend this thing in the comments after seeing those stats. Still, I don't want people to think I have a vendetta against this weapon. I quite enjoy using it, and I equip it whenever I get the craving. Team be damned. But since these videos' main goal is to be educational, I just have to be honest. It's not as good as the other metaguns, but that doesn't make it a bad weapon. It is still a metagun, meaning it will have a much more significant impact on the scope of a game than almost anything else. So if you like it so much, or you've had success with it in the past, my advice is to just ignore the stats section of this video and live in blissful ignorance. You'll be better off for it. Just please stop spamming my comment section saying quick fix is OP. We're done with that now. It's over. But actually do keep spamming for the algorithm. Thank you.
Find me. That's right there. That's by me.
Yeah.
Spido.
What is this guy doing? He's oh my god! It's a massacre!